About 60 countries around the world today are under authoritarian rule. That is, their elections are not free and fair. The government dictates the religion people should follow, and people are punished for expressing political opinions and speaking against the government of the day. One of those countries is Venezuela. The country isn't at war, but since 2014, a quarter of the population has fled the country or are displaced. That is because of deteriorating economic and political conditions. In July this year, Venezuela held an election. President Nicolas Maduro was declared the winner. That is despite independent observers saying that the election did not meet the international standards of a democratic, free and fair election. His main challenger, Ana Corina Machado, was barred from running. Her replacement, Edmundo Gonzalez, stood in her place. He is said to have won more votes than Nicolas Maduro despite the repression. He's recognized today by the EU and others as the president-elect of Venezuela. Both of them have been awarded the Sakharov Prize. That is the EU's highest tribute to human rights workers and defenders. Other winners include South Africa's Nelson Mandela and Russia's Alexei Navalny. I caught up with the president-elect here in Strasbourg, where he was handed the award. Is there the sense in Venezuela that the Maduro regime is weaker today than it's ever been?
It's weaker than ever. The signs that the government has sent to the public opinion in general is that a symbol of weakness. All these desperate measures taken by the government receive the signal of weakness. I mean, there is another prisoner, political prisoner, who died in jail, and many other decisions that they have taken represents that they are not in full control of the situation.
President Maduro's allies are known. Chief among them are Russia and China. Can you help us understand how these two countries are propping up the Maduro regime?
I would say that this regime has losing allies. I mean, Syria is no longer an ally. Most of the governments in the region, in Latin America, are now respecting us and recognize us as a president-elect of Venezuela. And this is something that we have to encourage, that they will do other countries to do that.
What will it take to have you installed as the president of Venezuela? As you're saying, you are recognized widely as the president-elect of the country. You have been recognized as the winner of the July election. What is it going to take to have you take the reins of power from Nicolas Maduro?
Because this is the will of the people, and we have to respect the will of the people that choose me as the president of Venezuela. We have to respect the will of the people.
And what is it that the international community can do to help you in this regard?
To support me, to support the result of the election, and to support the Venezuelan people who choose and decide for a change of government.
And my final question, the world's eyes have been on the wars that are raging in different countries, in Ukraine and in the Middle East. So you're in a way also not getting as much attention. What is your message to world leaders who perhaps have not kept their eyes on what is going on in your country? Why is it important that as much attention is put onto that?
The most important thing is that Venezuelan people decide on July 28 that I will be the next president of Venezuela, and that must be respected.
What is the next move for you, sir?
To go to Venezuela and be sworn in by the authorities of the National Assembly.
Are you going to return to Venezuela? You're currently in Spain, where you've had to flee to because the regime is seeking your arrest.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I plan to go to Venezuela to be there by January the 10th.
So that was the president-elect of Venezuela. The leader of the opposition, Maria Corina Machado, is in hiding. She fears the regime. She's also barred from leaving the country. She couldn't be in Strasbourg today. But her daughter, Ana Corina Sosa, is representing her here today, and I spoke with her. After the fall of Syria's Bashar al-Assad, eyes are on other dictators around the world. And the question for you is there any indication that the regime of Nicolas Maduro in Venezuela is in any way weaker today?
Well, yes, there is many indications. Let's start internally. They are acting with a lot more desperation in their brutal repression towards my mother's team, the opposition, Edmundo's team, and Venezuelans of all ages. So that shows a sign of despair, of anxiety. So that's one thing. And then externally, I mean, you mentioned the Syrian conflict. We're talking, it's very different and complex conflicts in very different regions, but they hold the same allies. Geopolitical allies, and they show that they're weak. They're at their weakest points, and they're also distracted. And this creates a lot of nervousness for the regime of Nicolás Maduro, because what happens on one side of the world has repercussions on the other, and this is for sure an indication of their weakness.
What has been keeping the Nicolás Maduro regime alive?
There are many different factions, and it's a complicated situation in Venezuela. We have historically had immense oil income. As you know, we have one of the biggest oil reserves in the world. Even though they've destroyed the oil production, it still signifies an important influx of money that goes directly to the government that they control. So that's one thing. The other thing is they also control the military, which has been, it's difficult to gauge. It is a complicated faction, but we've seen support flourishing from different sections of the military. For example, was in the elections, the day of the 28th of July, presidential elections, we would have not been able to retrieve and safeguard 83% of the electoral tally sheets if it were not for the military support on the ground. So that is indications that are important on our favor. But this has been a stronghold of the dictatorship of Nicolás Maduro in the past. And then the last thing is just they control all powers of government. There is absolutely no independence of power. And that's something that the people abroad need to understand. And that's why it's so important that we have the support of the governments abroad, because the Venezuelans have done tremendous labor and fight, and courageously so, in showing up and voting despite sacrificing and risking everything, sometimes their own lives, to speak up, but we cannot do it alone without the support of the governments abroad.
Anna, your mother is in hiding. She's barred from traveling. We hear that thousands of people are in prison. Can you just give us a sense of how dangerous the situation is right now for Venezuelans in opposition?
It is very dangerous to speak up against the government and fight for freedom in our country right now. You said it, there's thousands of prisoners right now being tortured in torture centers without a fair legal process, without access to medical care, without seeing their families. And we're talking about children, adolescents, elderly. Just yesterday, another Venezuelan unfairly, unjustly in prison was murdered by the regime. And these imprisonments happen because a child posts a picture that insinuates they're against the government, and they're accused of terrorism. So you can imagine the despair on the ground, and they rule by fear. So it is very dangerous. But one thing I want to say that the government doesn't realize is that in their campaign of terror, they awaken something unshakable within the Venezuelans, and it's the will to survive, the will for justice, the will to live in freedom. So in this terror that they've spread out in the streets, they're also creating a resilient new nation.
My final question, your mother is the winner of this prize. Can you just tell our viewers the personal sacrifices that she's made for the struggle?
This started, if I look back, it's been more than 20 years that she's been fighting for the freedom of our country. And it has been a long and difficult journey, I'm not gonna lie. There's been many years where she's been left alone without allies. And what has always accompanied her is the truth. And she has spoken to Venezuelans with the truth before her, no matter how hard it was to hear at the moment. And I think that with the years, Venezuelans woke up to that and said, we need to be spoken with truth, with reality, with honesty, talk about a decent future, a future of opportunities, but yes, of hard work. And I think her consistent message has created that bond between her and the people in Venezuela. It has come, yes, at huge sacrifices. My mother herself cannot leave the country for more than 11 years now, which means she's missed a lot of family milestones, our graduations, our birthdays, because me and my brothers have had to move abroad outside Venezuela for our security. So it comes at a big personal cost, yes, and sacrifice, but it's a very fulfilling journey as well. And it is one that I'm deeply proud of as her daughter.